Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Handsome German, the only show on the internet. And, shit. God damn it. Okay. We're back. We're back. We're back. Alright. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Handsome German, the only show on the internet. And today, since I'm a little too late to tell you whether you should buy Deathloop or not, and you should, if you like stealth action games, if you like first-person shooters with RPG elements, there's a lot to love in this game, even though it feels like a prototype for an expansion that is going to turn what is a great game into an absolute masterpiece in the future, either an expansion or a sequel. I recommend this game for its gameplay and for its storytelling, but today I'm specifically here to talk about the endings. And right now what you're seeing is the first time I reached the end of the game. So you're going to see my unfiltered decision pretty much play out exactly as it did. Obviously exactly as it did. What am I talking about? Anyway, there are two endings to the game. There's a third one if you count not choosing as an ending. I recorded it regardless, just because I wanted to play the game again, but it doesn't really count. So I'm going to focus on the two endings that actually lead to the credits and end the game, you know? And I'm just going to let this bit of conversation play out for a bit. If you don't, if you've already heard this conversation a bunch of times, you can just press the right key a couple of times and skip past it. So just interrupting here real quick. Something that was a really interesting reveal to me is the fact that the reason everybody else forgets what happened during the previous loop is because they got bored of the life they were leading inside the loop. And I find that particularly interesting because they've been doing this for what, unless Juliana is lying or exaggerating, they've been doing this for 150 years. And it kind of implies that there isn't really anything special about Colt and Juliana, because the only reason they maintain their memories is because they're sick. They're psychopaths that enjoy inflicting pain on other people so much that they don't get bored of it for years upon years of just doing the same thing over and over again. And I think the fact that the first thing that Colt remembers when you start playing the game, the first thing you see is Colt getting stabbed by Juliana repeatedly, which to me implies that she got him when he started to get bored of the loop, of doing the same thing over and over again. But she didn't. And I find that an interesting bit of commentary on how the actions of a previous generation will influence later generations long after they're gone. The fact that, I don't know, say a country founded by a bunch of slave owners still has a bunch of people who think that slavery was pretty cool because it's been passed on over and over and over again by generations of people who never stopped to think that what they were doing was wrong. And even those who realized in the later years, a great example of that, obviously, I don't think he owned any slaves, but great example of that is H.P. Lovecraft, who was a very racist person for most of his life, but then ultimately came around when people presented him with evidence that actually humans are pretty much the same. Like, obviously they look different, but they have the same brain, they have the same organs, they have the same potential. And he ultimately came around and realized that what he was thinking was wrong. His beliefs were wrong. But at that point, the damage was already done. I have no doubt that there are people to this day who think that talking dismissively about African religions is totally fine because they read it in a Lovecraft book. Even though he came around, even though he got tired of being a bad person, in a way, kind of like Colt, who got bored of being a murderer, the damage was already done. And the fact that after losing his memory, Colt set out to break the loop, to me, kind of implies that he didn't lose all of his memory. He, with the psychometry on the walls, with his subconscious essentially telling him what to do, he wanted to... He got, the only reason he wants to break the loop is probably so he could go somewhere else and inflict harm on others, but this time there being lasting consequences. Either that, or he's got it all out of his system and he just wants to move on, but a man who seriously says that he likes shooting things and who thinks that the loop is a great place for target practice, I don't think there's really much hope for him in the outside world, especially once we see that the outside world is a complete fuckfest at this point.
Other worlds, other times.
Where we kill each other.
Sounds like fun. On 3. 1.
I've come too far.
I wonder if you can get those dueling pistols as a weapon. I'd love those. They seem so impractical. Oh, maybe I could have picked it up off the floor? I don't know. I might just break the loop again at some point the next couple of days just to play the game again because I really enjoy it. So now now the loop will be broken since all visionaries will be dead at the same time. And luckily the game had the decency of telling you that you will survive doing so. Because there was nothing telling you that there was going to be another loop. It could have just ended with you dying. This is another really neat story moment that I greatly enjoyed, where you can't necessarily expect people to forgive you for the things that you've done in the past. And again, I feel like they're, especially since it's very rare playing a game where your primary antagonist is your own daughter who you kill in increasingly brutal ways, such as firing gas bombs at her and then blowing them up to have her roll down the stairs and then stomp on her head repeatedly, which I honestly, I wasn't planning on killing her that way that one time, but that's just kind of how it worked out, and it's pretty messed up. It's this really interesting statement where nothing in Deathloop is absolutely good or bad. And we'll get into that even more on the ending that I actually enjoy more. This is the one that I enjoy slightly less. even though Juliana now is independent, essentially Colt forced her to break out of the loop. Or, you know, if you wanted to keep it as a metaphor, he basically told her that she had to move out and do something with her life. Which, you know, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced that at some point. With, you know, depending on how old you were when you moved out of your parents' house. And the thing is that if you take it as a metaphor for an abusive relationship, especially, where the mistreatment of the child leads to increasingly strong backlash, where what starts off as what our neighbors down the hall do, where you yell at your kids all the time. These people are horrible. We should, yeah. Anyway, it starts off as this bizarre, fucked up power trip where you just have all this control over someone who can't fight back and also doesn't have anywhere else to go. And then eventually, usually when they hit puberty, they'll be bigger and smarter and stronger. Maybe bigger, smarter, and stronger than you. And at that point, after that much mistreatment, they'll be a whole lot meaner than you are, too. And ultimately, you only have yourself to blame for that. I think what this game tries to tell us is that if that's how you treat the people around you, you should consider yourself lucky if they ignore you afterwards. You don't deserve them anymore. Yeah, Colt would probably love to have a family. As a matter of fact, we actually figure out that he did love having a family, and then he started unraveling. And we'll see in the other ending, he wants that again. He especially thinks it's cool to have a grown-up daughter that he can get drinks with. He's very much one of those dads who would have been a good uncle, but a terrible, terrible father, if you know what I mean. And I don't mean it like that. I don't mean... I find this an incredibly strong message to anyone who might have had these kinds of issues in the past. I know there's cases in my family, there's at least one case I could think of in my family, where the parents are lucky that the child is ignoring them now. It could have been so much worse. They could have just kept fighting. But ultimately they decided that, yeah, maybe just parting ways, deciding to let them leave was the only good thing they've ever done for them, or at least the only good thing in a very long time. And I very much acknowledge that a lot of my interpretation here is based entirely on personal feelings, but a story is what the reader gets out of it, and that's kind of what I'm getting out of this ending. You can also see that the world is balked. So this would be around the beginning of the 22nd century. And yeah, the world is a desert hellscape.
Here goes.
Here goes. And Colt chose to just leave everything behind and move forward into the unknown by himself. He decided to give up everything. Give up his friends, give up his family, and he was friends with several of the people involved in the Aeon program, at least with Frank, who was at some point in love with him. He was apparently friends with Igor, or at least had a mutual understanding of mutual respect for him. And he just leaves all these people behind, everything he knows, to go into the unknown. And I think a lot of us have at some point had moments in our lives where we felt stuck in a loop, be it a shitty dead-end job or college studies that you're not making any progress on, or maybe you just live in a place that doesn't have anything to offer for you. It doesn't have a theater group and you've always wanted to join one. It doesn't have a board game store and you always wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. It doesn't have enough potential partners, or everyone there already knows you and knows you're a fucking weirdo who didn't have any friends in elementary school. So you just gotta break out of that loop if you are unhappy with it. And it's a very basic premise, obviously, where the game tells you to change things if that's what you want. What's interesting, though, is that it doesn't tell you that everything will be better once you change. Usually stories will be like, oh yeah, and then Billy Elliot went to the ballet school and became a famous ballet dancer. Yeah, that's how some stories end. But this one, it just tells you, yeah, you destroyed everything that you have. Where are you gonna go now? And that's just the less interesting ending, at least to me. So let's see if that mouse still works. Let's see if we're still recording before I commit another. Yes, okay, we're still recording. Cool. All right. Then there's a non-ending here where you just kill Juliana and then sit on a chair. You just sit on the chair. This is obviously the least interesting of the endings because it technically doesn't count. Though what's interesting about it is that I just realized I don't know if Juliana's dialogue changes if you shoot her here. It looks like, oh no, I have to play through the game again tonight. Oh no, whatever. I enjoy it a lot. So, obviously one of the options, since you have all the time in the world, is to just do it next time. Just, you know, you can just put it off forever. It's not very satisfying. You're not going to know what you want to do with the rest of your life afterwards, but it's an option. But let's get to the ending that I actually really, really like.
You murdered me. Won't forgive.
Da 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 da
Other
da da
time.
da da.
You know, for a second you almost had me.
Okay. Here
Alright, so this is a very interesting ending in that you don't change anything. You decide to continue down the road
You can call
that you were on.
me, Dad, if you want.
Okay. Dad.
Okay, that's,
Too weird.
yeah, that's not,
Yep, no.
Stop. Please stop.
I love the banter between the two. Alright. I'll just keep it as a still frame so I know when to cut. So this ending is fascinating to me because it really distinguishes between players who are in it for the story and those who are in it for the gameplay. Because if you're in for the story, then you're going to want to progress. You're going to want to get through it, which means that you want to break the gameplay loop eventually. You don't want to just keep sneaking around and hitting people with swords and shooting them and kicking them off of ledges and whatnot. You want to see where the story goes. You want to see what's in the future, which is, perfectly encapsulated by the break the loop ending. You know that as of right now, there's nothing on the horizon for Colt's story, for DEATHLOOP, for its universe. Which is perfectly illustrated by Colt looking out to the now dried up sea and seeing absolutely nothing except for a new sunrise. And that's, one ending. The other ending consists of you staying in the loop and Colt becoming better friends with Juliana. Which, considering what they've been through, is maybe kind of nice. It does have the unfortunate connotation that means that Juliana and Colt enjoy inflicting suffering so much that they don't even care that they're inflicting it upon one another every now and again. They don't even care that they've killed each other hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of times already since entering the loop. But what's interesting about it is the fact that it suddenly recontextualizes the multiplayer. And multiplayer games are nowadays usually live service games. In this case, more of a lifestyle game, kind of like Dark Souls, like something that you can play forever just because there's so many variables and the multiplayer keeps things moving. Where you don't really play to see the end of the story. You play because you enjoy what you're doing. And the idea that now, after you've seen that ending, every single invasion by another player is recontextualized as you and Juliana just fucking around because you think it's funny, because you think it's enjoyable, because you can yeet each other off of cliffs and then laugh about it the next day. It is probably one of the best multiplayer story narrative combinations that I've ever seen in a video game. It's honestly kinda brilliant, and weirdly the only thing that's really stopping it from being truly perfect is the fact that Colt maxes out, reaches maximum power pretty quickly. Like, you can only equip 4 trinkets and 4 character trinkets and 3 weapon trinkets per gun. You only need to have 2 upgrades for 2 of your slabs that you like, and then you're as powerful as you're going to get. Which kind of gets in the way of the endless replayability that a multiplayer game might be going for, usually is going for. And add on top of that, the way you unlock new gear as Juliana is pretty annoying, with everything being randomized, and I still don't have a proper rifle, just one of those silver bullet ones where if the game lags and you miss, then the gun is useless for the rest of the mission, so that's great. And it kind of gets in the way of the game becoming infinitely replayable. However, in terms of the story, there are a number of really neat things that you suddenly begin to realize. For example, Juliana is on the hunt. It doesn't say she's out to get you. Hunting is considered a sport by many people, and I guess I can see why, even though, it's kind of fucked up to say that, but it still adds a level of playfulness to the proceedings, and then you suddenly realize that this entire time, Juliana was also capable of fucking with the other NPCs in the world. She's also capable of fucking with enemies. You can walk up to a visionary and snap their neck as Juliana, and they won't know what hit them, because of course not, because last they knew, Juliana was on their side. And the fact that now, obviously, that Colt and Juliana are not opposed anymore, she's also not going to announce that Colt betrayed the Visionaries. So he gets to live life again. He gets to go to the weird cannibal party and enjoy it, if that's what he wants to do. And it's kind of implied that at least, some semblance of partying will be involved. Thing is that the game has dialogue for enemies looking for Juliana, for reacting to her attacking them. And they will do that if they see you kill too many of their people. So the developers fully expected that at some point the Juliana players might start to fight against the sandbox rather than Colt himself. Which, add to that the ability to invade the timeline of a friend, which there's 2 ways of looking at that. Either, invade someone from your friend list, or maybe it also means invade someone that you already have an understanding with. Because if you invade one of your friends and you're talking on Discord or on Steam or whatever, you can, right then and there, agree to come up with some incredibly elaborate plan to kill a bunch of visionaries in incredibly strange ways, using the fact that Juliana can move freely through them without getting attacked. And I just love that element of this ending. Because just like a lot of other things in Deathloop, you're not actually restricted from doing it, but you might not be thinking of doing it. And, that's just a cool little thing that I love about time loop games. You gain knowledge both as the character and as a player. Now, the other layer to this ending that I want to talk about is the idea of not breaking the loop, which most of the time would probably be considered a bad ending, considering that this is what happens when you die anyway, so why did you put all this work in for that? But it has kind of this interesting thing where once you grow a little bit older, and unfortunately I'm very much doing that, growing a little bit older and whatnot, you might reach a point where you've broken the loop so many times that you've made all the changes you feel that you need to make. Like, I feel like my entire journey as a person began 10 years ago when I moved out of my parents' house and moved into an apartment myself in the town I was studying in. And then that didn't work out because, mental health and just general disinterest in 90% of what I was studying.
Stop, please.
I love the dialogue in this game. Led to me feeling trapped again. Just like living in a tiny-ass German village with nothing to do, with the knowledge that, save for, like, 2 of my cousins, I hated every single person my age in the entire fucking place. Because I went to school with these idiots. I felt trapped then, and after moving into a bigger city, after picking up some hobbies, doing some theater, joining the students' union, fun stuff. Stuff that really made me feel like now I found a loop that I'm happy with. But ultimately, the longer it went on and the worse my mental health got, and the less often I attended classes and I started to miss tests and everything just went down the drain, I just felt the need that I needed to break out of that loop again. And then, 3, 4, 5 more times of that, where I did get increasingly happier with every new routine that I established that was created for me. It was only pretty recently that we moved from Germany to Hawaii, which is the biggest break that I've ever done. Not just in terms of physical distance, but obviously, literally, almost as far as I could have gone. But also in terms of how different my life would be. Because if you're stuck in the same place, or even if you're happy in the same place, there's going to be the same routine, the same grocery store, the same board game shelf in the same department store, the same cinema that only shows weird artsy French movies that you just don't want to go see. After a while, you kind of get used to all the people around you and all the options that you have. And that's when you have to decide if you want that. Because life is never going to be 100% perfect in every way. But there are ways you can work towards something that's ultimately going to make you and the people around you happier. And the most bizarre thing happened only very recently. And it's weird that, like, I'm bringing mortgages into the analysis of a video game about 2 crazy people killing each other for fun. Thinking about taking out a mortgage to buy a house, something that you'd be committed to for 30 years, usually, feels like the option of settling down and being happy with the loop that you have now established for yourself. And it's fascinating because usually the ending where everything changes, where the hero gets, well, hero, you know, where the protagonist gets what they want, should feel like the happy ending. It should feel like the one that fills you with hope and makes you want to know what happens next. But not in Deathloop, where despite showing how deeply, deeply disturbed and messed up the world is that Colt and Juliana find themselves in, and it is those things partially because of their own actions, of their own choices, they're happy there. It's a metaphor, if you will, for an imperfect world that two people are making the most out of. And the idea of a game telling you that, hey, maybe it's okay. Maybe if you're happy, you don't actually have to worry about burning down your house and going as far as you want. And you can never go back. This is the second time I'm recording this entire rant, and I referenced Little Inferno a lot on my first time through, so I had to reference it at some point this time. Maybe it's okay. Maybe you can settle in to a comfortable routine. You can hang out with the same people. You can go to the same 4 places over and over again. And the only thing that'll change about that entire situation is what you'll do while you're there. Even though you know that, hey, if I don't go to the beach today, I can go there tomorrow, because it'll still be there. And if we don't go to the mall tomorrow, we can go there the day after, because it'll still be there. And I just think that's an incredibly fascinating ending to a game that's all about breaking out of a loop, where it very successfully made me question if breaking out of the loop is even the right thing to do. A final little detail that I absolutely love about this game, before I wrap this up, is that by default in the main menu, when you choose between breaking and protecting the loop, if you're playing with a controller, the cursor will be on protect the loop by default.
Pitchfork.
And a little bit of meta storytelling is that usually the protagonist is the character who wants to maintain the status quo, while the antagonist is trying to make changes to the world that the protagonist disagrees with. You can see that in any story where a dragon steals a princess and the hero goes, no, 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 the princess doesn't go in your castle, the princess always goes into her castle. What are you doing? You can see that when Sauron is trying to take over Middle-earth and everybody else is like, no, you people stay where you belong. And I think more effectively than a lot of games, and I was about to list some examples, but then I realized that saying those examples would just be massive spoilers. This game does an excellent job of not making you realize that you've been the villain playing as Colt this whole time. And I kind of adore that. I think it's really well done. Colt is the villain of Deathloop. Juliana was the hero all along. And in the end, it all just comes down to whether you can convert the villain / yourself into accepting the status quo, which is the loop. Or if you fail, to stop him from destroying what might be the last remnants of humanity, because for all we know, these people on this island are it. And that's just something
You bet.
really clever, really smart, and I think that's all I had to say about Deathloop's endings. Thank you very much for watching. This is a bit of a different approach to video making. I'm probably going to do the same thing for Metroid Dread, hoping that it has multiple endings, or maybe at least one good one. Because, you know, I'm not gonna be able to get a review out on the day the game comes out. Because, you know, Nintendo has not noticed me yet, obviously. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you subscribe for more. Should you have found this dive into Deathloop's endings interesting? Hey, wake up, Tutor. Okay. Should you have found this dive into Deathloop's endings interesting, or informative, or good to fall asleep to? Make sure you click on my channel below the video to watch my review of Monster Jaunt, which is a great game.
Welcome back.
And I'll see you next time.
Pistols. Vintage
I'll
pieces.
see you next time.
Original oil
Bye-bye.
cartridges, completely unique.